Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Web Behind podcast. Today with me, I have Emily Rose, better known maybe as Nexi Love on Twitter. Hi, Emily.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Oh, quite well. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. So cool. Do you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're up to? I know you're involved in like some cool community events and do some cool programming stuff and all sorts of things.
Sure. Lately I've been doing a lot with the concept of IoT or the Internet of Things, and I kind of just fell into that by happenstance, just by getting involved in the Node community. When I did, and I guess these days I'm fun employed. I'm working on kind of transitioning from more of an engineering role to doing more evangelism. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Pretty awesome. What kind of IoT things have you been up to?
So I spent some time working at Particle, formerly known as Spark, where I did most of the open source, kind of stewardship, taking care of the command line interface and that kind of thing, building out JavaScript API libraries and things like that. So a lot of fun getting a chance to interface with the community on kind of an official level.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was I remember like I was kind of late to the game with the Internet of Things. But I got my first Tesla like 2 years ago or something like that.
Nice.
Just
Yeah.
had so much fun with it, especially just like using JavaScript for it, where I didn't have to learn. I don't even remember,
Right.
it's like C# or something for Arduino.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. C is generally what you'd use for Arduino. So.
yeah, that's really cool. Cool. So maybe could you take us back? I'm not sure how long before you were involved in tech. What were you up to?
Let me think. It's been a long time since I haven't been involved in tech. I think so. Like my very first job was like a clerk at a convenience store working graveyard shift. Like a plaid pantry in
Nice.
Oregon, and so I did that. And then as soon as I turned 18, I moved to Texas, which is a whole nother story entirely. But I ended up shortly after that, kind of starting my own, I guess, consulting firm down there, doing just like small business support of like IT things.
Wow.
Um,
So that
so
was back when you were still around 18 years old.
yeah, I think that was, I don't know exactly when that was, but yeah, I was about
Knew what you
18.
wanted to be doing right away.
Pretty much, yeah. At the time, I was more focused on like networking and hardware, just because I had taken classes in high school that taught me about building computers and doing networking and that sort of stuff. So I used that as kind of getting my foot in the door with small businesses, and then I realized that I wanted to learn web web development as well, and so I started pitching people that I was already working with on how they really needed a website, just because I wanted to learn how to build them. So.
Nice. Where in Texas did you move to?
So it was this tiny little town called Granbury, Texas, near Fort Worth, and kind of had this reputation for being like this like middle of nowhere town that really didn't have much going for it, other than strangely lots of like rich people sprinkled in, a bunch of meth addicts, and
What?
it was a weird place.
What? What drew you to that area? How'd you find out about that place?
Oh, like I said, that is an entirely different story. I moved to Texas because I thought I was in love with someone, and so I started a relationship with someone. Which, by the way, kids, those of you listening at home, don't buy a one-way ticket to go and stay with someone that you've never met before. Lesson learned there.
That's a lesson learned. All right. I like that.
Well, I was 18. I was
Heck
young.
yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So then so you started really young. Maybe you could kind of take us through, job by job and talk about what you did starting at the consulting firm all the way
Oh,
to.
jeez. Yeah, let me pull up my resume real quick. No, so yeah, like I said, I started this silly little consulting firm, I guess, in Texas, and I called it Christian Computer Solution because there was just a lot of really religious people down there, and it was like free advertising basically. And so, I built a little website and started doing that, and like I said, that kind of parlayed into doing more web development stuff. And so it gave me a pretty good, I guess, foundational understanding of various pieces of tech, and at least knowing how to pretend I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so after about, I think, 3 or 4 years in Texas, I finally moved back to Oregon, and promptly got a job at Circuit City running the tech bench.
Nice.
And so that was really fun. Not really, but it was also an experience. So basically was doing the same thing that I was doing in Texas on my own, but for Circuit City, which at the time it made more sense, like more stable income and all that. So I did that. Go ahead.
How did you go about getting clients when you started this thing?
Oh, yeah. So basically,
Young.
yeah, like I said, I named the business that I started Christian Computer Solution, and I was in the Bible Belt. And I'm not saying what I did was right or anything, but I would just put ads in like the nickel ads, and just kind of list the services that I had, and I would get a constant stream of generally older men, older women, just really like, now I want you to know, you get my business because I prefer to do business with good Christian men. And so, thank you and God bless.
Now, did you, for those that have never met you, you usually rock some pretty awesome hair and piercing. Did you have that look going on back when you were 18?
No, I did not. As a matter of fact, when I was 18, that was prior to my transition. So I was presenting as a cis male at the time, trying to be very clean cut. I was going to church 3 days a week, trying to, fit that role. So yeah, no, I was able to blend in a lot better back then. These days, I think such shenanigans would not go over quite as well.
Just the face-to-face would be.
Yeah, the sigil of Baphomet that I tend to wear might not, it's a pretty strong indication. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, but yeah, sorry, I lost track of what we were
No.
saying.
I was just curious. Then okay, cool. So you go back to Oregon. You start at Circuit City, which for anybody that's I guess like I don't know under 20 listening was like Best Buy, right? Back
right. Yeah, it was like the Best Buy that wasn't quite Best Buy, and they were basically a clone. And they ended up going under because, as I later found out, they were just committing wage fraud all the way across the board. And so I was actually one of the people that was part of a class action lawsuit. I didn't know it until later. I just got a check. But so they were basically a scam version of Best Buy.
No, Best Buy also, because so I kind of took a different route. I ended up working at Best Buy very briefly.
Yeah.
I don't know about wage scams, but they also had some of the wildest things, like your paycheck could only be accessed through this custom Best Buy credit card that they would give you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like that, I was like, this is not for me. But it is interesting how those businesses run. So were you doing like the equivalent of the kind of Geek Squad stuff, like the actual fixing and repairing of computers, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I was coordinating that whole thing. So I was like maintaining the schedule and like booking people and helping to upsell all the services. Like I'm sure most people know by now, when you go into a big box store like that and you buy a computer, like the salesperson's job is to like attach a bunch of other services and things that they don't generally necessarily need but have higher margin. And so I was kind of part of that process of like showing people why they want us to like tune their computer and uninstall a bunch of adware and give them antivirus and things like that.
Right. Now, so I worked the floor, so I didn't get much experience like in that area. Was it pretty formulaic? Like, did you have custom tools that you used, or were you more kind of challenged to figure out, like what's wrong with this computer? How do I fix it? That kind of thing.
No, it was pretty much like fending for myself. When I took over, there was a handful of really basic tools, like a power supply tester and, some of the more esoteric, head types for screwdrivers if you're trying to take apart a laptop. But I had to kind of fight for all of the software and diagnostic tools that I ended up using. I don't really remember the details, but at the time it was one of those, kits that came with special dongles that would test, USB ports and stuff like that. But,
gotcha.
Yeah, cool. It was pretty Wild West at first.
So how long did you work there?
I think I only worked there for about a year before I ended up rage quitting.
Was it a fun rage quit or just?
It was pretty fun. I had everyone in the store trying to convince me not to leave, and I was just like, no, I see what they're doing. And basically what they had done is there was one customer who really pitched a fit about what they thought was a botched service job. And so they went all the way up to corporate and complained. And since I was the one in charge of the tech bench, even though I had no involvement in the incident, they made me the scapegoat. And the funny thing was that when I took over the tech bench, for a short time, I was working with a gentleman that I really liked, who kind of just disappeared shortly after I started working there. And then his cryptic warning that he gave me shortly before he left suddenly made sense. So
Gotcha.
I was like, I'm leaving before you guys have the chance of just squeezing my schedule and making me
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you rage quit Circuit City.
I rage quit Circuit City, indeed. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that's basically when I decided to kickstart my consulting firm again. And so I just, instead of going with the whole facade of like Christian Computer Solution, which wasn't nearly as popular in Oregon, I just, did general consulting. And I think I got a lot of my initial work off of Craigslist. And then from there, word of mouth, working primarily with like small business entrepreneurs, people like, like tax preparers and fiduciary whatevers. And one of my bigger clients was like a land usage consultant and just really weird stuff like that.
So were you doing more web stuff at this point, or still kind of a mix of that and the networking hardware stuff?
Yeah, so I did a mix of stuff, and I started like, I worked with like an older gentleman for briefly who kind of had more experience with like just kind of the the landscape of being a small business consultant. And so I picked up some some terminology and stuff from him and started referring to myself as a business process analyst. And what I would do is essentially kind of a combination of like just being someone's one-stop shop support for anything tech. So I would like sit with people and like see how they worked and offer suggestions for how to modernize and make better use of technology. So it was a combination of like just setting up new computers and getting the printers on the network and fixing things when they broke, but also like building websites and and actually custom software as well.
Nice. So how long did you do this bout of consulting?
Oh gosh, several years. I think off and on. It was a hazy time. I'm gonna tell you, John. I don't remember the exact time, but it was a couple of years.
Cool. Were you starting to drift still more towards software, or did you kind of, for those years, did you stay doing both?
I definitely, I started to realize that I was definitely having a lot more fun with the software, and it was also nice to like not end up having like cuts all over my hands and dirty clothes from having to climb in closets, and all the wiring and digging into computers was not as fun as it used to be.
Gotcha. Cool. So what comes next after this bout?
So I think the best thing to do is fast forward a little bit to where I end up moving to Portland. And so again, still doing much of the same thing, kind of just consulting with small businesses. And I had been working with a client for some time in Portland, but commuting from Salem and meeting with them on a regular basis. And they were my biggest contract. So I made the decision to move up there. And that later turned into kind of more of a business partnership. And so that's when I began working with a vegan strip club in Portland, Oregon. And I know it sounds weird, but I was basically doing, again, just kind of all of the business process analysis, but focusing on building a customer loyalty and rewards program, as well as automating some of the accounting.
Okay, so you end up, is this kind of becomes your full-time job then?
Yeah, it was full-time for several years. So I think I was with them till around 2012. So this is where I ended up, getting into Node.js and discovering, hardware and Arduino. And it was really just out of necessity. Like, we would sit down and brainstorm on things that the club needed to run, more effectively and more safely. And so things like, for example, like the club had a rash of break-ins where people were trying to break into the safe and steal all the cash, and like, the security systems that we had were not working well. So I actually built a security system with Arduino and ultrasonic sensors and magnetic switches and things like that, and hooked it up to Twilio for the actual notifications. So we could connect it. We could turn it on and off with our phones or text messages and all that. So yeah, it was kind of my first introduction to kind of the more modern aspect of the web and IoT, really.
That is really cool. I've always, toyed around with stuff, but I've never like actually had, like a real production use case for all that stuff. This is really cool that you actually had you wrote your own security system essentially.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, there were a lot of things I could have done better, but it definitely served its purpose. So, it was a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So were you kind of bitten by the Node bug? Like, did it immediately strike you as like Node and Internet of Things as what you wanted to be doing, or was it a kind of slower transition?
Well, at first, when I was evaluating, the various technologies that I could use to solve these problems, like I had been working with, PHP and, Postgres and kind of more traditional things. And when I first discovered Node, I was like, JavaScript on the server, that doesn't seem reliable. Um, but I ended up somehow getting a ticket to NodeConf, the first NodeConf in Portland. And I was like, I was already really interested in the possibility, even if I was a little, kind of cautiously optimistic. But yeah, like as soon as I went to the conference, there was so much awesome stuff happening. The highlight really for me was when Chris Williams unveiled Node Serial Port. And it was like, I was just kind of like in awe because I was literally like, how am I going to solve this? And I was looking at things like Python and Ruby, which didn't feel as natural of a fit. And when I saw Node Serial Port, it was like magic. I could hear the angels singing and everything. So I immediately went home and started, downloaded that and started trying to figure out what the hell CommonJS was and how I required things. And it was really awkward, but I kind of, cobbled together this really basic interaction with, my Arduino code that I had been working on and through JavaScript.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So cool. So this is kind of the job you work for. Did you say a few years there at this club?
Yeah, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years around there. But yeah, I stopped working with them, I think around the end of 2012.
Okay.
And I took a job with a startup doing IoT stuff and Node stuff.
Nice. So what's up with this startup?
So they were so it's a startup called Ninja Blocks, and they're based out of Sydney, Australia. And they hired me to be one of the first Node, full-time Node people. And so I helped them, building out the actual Node client that ran on the block, which was it was a BeagleBone in a nice case. And you hook it up to your network, and then you used it as kind of the central hub for doing any IoT or home automation stuff that you wanted to do. So I worked on the Node client, and I built like their module system, so you could like add functionality and stuff like that.
Did you get to go to Australia?
No, sadly I did not. But I did get to travel a bit with folks and do workshops in various places in the US. So that was fun. But yeah, so I mean, that was kind of my first, I guess, like real job as a Node developer, and I did that for almost a year. I definitely learned a lot there as well. I got to work with awesome people, like Tim Oxley, and yeah, I think it was a really solid start for me.
Cool. Were you still living in Portland during that time?
Yeah, I was living in Portland throughout my time, working for Casa Diablo and Ninja Blocks, and Casa Diablo, by the way, being the vegan strip club, kind of notorious in that area. But yeah, so I was living in Portland, and then right around the time that my contract ended with Ninja Blocks, I had been talking with Sauce Labs down in the Bay Area about coming to work for them, and so I ended up doing that towards the end of 2013.
What was that transition like? I mean, I guess going from Portland to San Francisco and going from kind of a smaller company. Was Sauce Labs bigger, I'm assuming?
Yeah, Sauce Labs was a lot bigger than Ninja Blocks, which I think was like 5 or 6 people. I think Sauce Labs at the time was like around 20. So like I was brought on, I think, kind of at the beginning of another one of those, as they say, growth phases. So shortly after, I showed up, there was a lot more people working there as well.
Gotcha. Was that kind of like a shock? I don't know, like moving places and
yeah, it was pretty intense. So I mean, basically, my wife and myself and our 1-year-old child were all living in Portland quite happily, and I had the option of working for Twilio as an evangelist and staying in Portland, or going down to Sauce Labs and working as an engineer on this, mobile R&D project. And we decided that, coming down to the Bay would be, better long-term for my career. And so basically packed most of our things into storage in Portland, and then took only the essentials with us in like a U-Haul trailer. And then we all jumped in my Chevrolet Impala and
nice.
and drove down to San Francisco, which was a terrible idea, but we did it. And so yeah, we basically were homeless for about 3 months, living in various Airbnbs, and then staying with friends in Santa Rosa, where I commuted down to the city every day, and hacked a parking garage to get cheap parking. So yeah, the transition, needless to say, was quite daunting. It was pretty drastic, and in retrospect, I see that I think it triggered a pretty severe depression for me, because it was, like you said, it was so many things changing at once. It was kind of hard to take in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What were you working on at Sauce Labs? You mentioned like an R&D project.
Yeah, so so my title was officially software engineer, mobile R&D, and when I signed up to work for the team, it was just Raquel Velez and myself. Shortly thereafter, Phil Mai joined as well. But it was for quite a while. It was the three of us, and we were supposed to be working on figuring out how to let people run, Appium tests on real Android devices in our cloud. And so we worked on that for a bit, and then shortly thereafter realized that we needed to improve our Android virtual device performance. And so we did a lot of really fun hacks there with, playing with Docker and using LXC and trying to eliminate a layer of emulation. And so we did that, and then again switched back to actually doing the real Android device stuff. And so, the TLDR on that was we essentially were putting, I think almost 100 Android devices in a 4U rack mount box that we had custom fabricated down in Sunnyvale or whatever. And inside it were also, like a hub to power all the devices, and a wireless access point, and power supplies. And maybe I'm giving away a bunch of company secrets and I'm going to get sued. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And we got to play with, virtual file systems and other fun things I had never touched before. So
yeah, it sounds like a really, really cool gig, like a lot of really interesting, challenging stuff.
Yeah, I learned a ton. But it was very broadening in terms of my horizons, learning technologies I never would have had the chance to work with otherwise. But I kind of started realizing I was not doing as much software development as I would have liked, and I felt really isolated from the Node community as well, which was kind of ironic given that I had moved down to the Bay Area to get more involved and feel closer to all the Node stuff. So because Sauce was primarily a Python shop as well, so there wasn't really a ton of opportunities to use Node.
Gotcha. So what comes next after all this cool Android stuff?
So yeah, like I said, I was starting to feel, the itch to get back into the community and do more Node stuff directly. And, around the time that I made the realization that that's what I wanted to do, I also realized that Particle, which at the time was called Spark, had just moved their headquarters to San Francisco. And so I reached out to them, and it kind of just happened really quickly. I think it was less than a week or about a week or so. And suddenly I was going to be working for them in a couple weeks. And so, my responsibilities there were just, working with, like I said, primarily just all Node and JavaScript, working with the community, doing JavaScript API libraries and command line interface. And there was also some, fun Node architectural work as well, but I definitely focused on the, kind of the front end.
So that seems like you really got back into the part of the stack that you're really passionate about with that
job
position.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a much better fit for me. So
that's pretty awesome. So how long were you at Spark?
I was again at Spark for about a year. Sorry, I was just looking over my resume to make sure I didn't forget anything important. So I worked with them for about a year. I kind of, inadvertently developed this weird year-long cadence with a lot of the companies that I was working with. But I worked with them for, I think, 11 or 13 months or something like that. And long story short, I realized that, doing open source and working with Node and JavaScript was great, but I wanted to do even more, evangelizing and working with, working directly with people and facilitating success with technology. So I made the decision to leave Particle and did some contracting with a company co-founded by a friend of mine, JewelBots, co-founded by Sarah Chips. And that was a lot of fun as well. I got to, again, work with a completely different stack as far as, hardware goes. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about that as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I would actually, at JewelBots, I'm a huge fan. I would love to hear your perspective on working on that stuff.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. So, JewelBots is still really early stage, as anyone who is familiar with them knows. And the concept is also something that, I think is phenomenal. And it's a programmable friendship bracelet. It's targeted for younger people, primarily marketed towards girls, and kind of a way to get, younger people involved in tech at an earlier age in a way that's compelling for them. And so I had a lot of fun. It's a Bluetooth low energy based device, and it's it's built around a mesh network with other JewelBots. So I had a lot of fun. I'd never worked with Bluetooth LE before. Hadn't really worked with the app stack that they had chosen. So for the prototype, they're building with Cordova and using Ionic and Angular. So I got a chance to dig into that and build out an app that helped them with a CES demo, which went pretty well, and helped them just kind of with some high level kind of architectural design ideas and things like that.
Yeah, I'll definitely link to them in the show notes. They kind of just when I first saw, I think, do they have a Kickstarter campaign? Am I making that up?
Yeah.
I think that's when I first saw them, and I was like, there's so much cool stuff going on in one product idea, where it's like teaching people to program, teaching kids to program, teaching young women to program, and then on top of that, there's this really the tech is this really cool kind of hackery, you're talking about these mesh networks of energy devices communicating with each other.
Exactly that, and it's all open source. So
really.
There were no bad decisions there. It's just a big pile of awesome. So,
I'll definitely link to that. That's great. Cool. So how long were you contracting with them?
So I contracted with them for about 3 months. At this point, like I said at the beginning, I'm in that fun employment phase and talking with companies about evangelism. So like I said, I've realized that's where I want to be now. I'm happiest when I'm directly involved in helping people, be successful and excited about tech.
Cool. Yeah, that's great.
As you can tell with the tone in my voice, right? I sound so excited.
I also frequently find myself kind of, oh yeah, that sounds amazing.
I'm very serious right now.
So now you also run Waffle.js, which are co-organized Waffle.js.
I was going to say, I don't know if I run Waffle.js. So much as it runs me,
15 feet from me, but in another room, so I think it'll be right. How did you get involved with that community? I'll put links.
Well, long story short, there I was minding my own business, and Visnu reached out and was like, "Hey, you want to start a meetup with me?" And I just without thinking was like, "Sure." And so now here we are. I guess it's been 8 of them, and I remember I think at least 2 or 3. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun. And my level of involvement is essentially, I show up to many of the meetings, maybe some of the meetings, and I give my opinions, and then I show up for the actual meetup, and I basically, I don't really know how to describe it. I'm just kind of a jerk for a while. I make jokes about people's talks. I try to be, lighthearted about it, but that's pretty much all I do there.
That's good. Did you know Visnu before this?
Yeah, I had known him from the Node community. I think I met him first at the first NodeConf, maybe the second NodeConf. They were both in Portland, so they kind of blur together for me. But yeah, I met him and Coco, which is my dog, by the way. I don't know if anyone knows that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Coco is actually my dog, which I have been letting stay with Visnu and Jane for, since I met them.
That's
I know I'm very generous, but so I knew him just from Node Knockout and the Node community, and I'm not sure why he reached out to me. He was probably drunk at the time.
He works in mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are there any other community events that I mean, it sounds like NodeConf,
Yeah.
which I'll also link to. What's NodeConf like? I've actually not been. I'd
Oh
like
my
to
God.
hear. I know.
Oh, well, the last one is coming up, so you should have to go to that.
Yeah.
NodeConf is pretty magical. Obviously I'm pretty biased because NodeConf has essentially made my career, but it's definitely changed over the years. I mean, the very first NodeConf is completely different than what it's like now. So, the first NodeConf was at PeerSpace in Portland, and it was, I guess, what you would expect from a conference. One big open space. It was a single track conference, or no, actually, it was a 2-track conference, the first one. So pretty standard fare there. Lots of technical talks, and things like that. And then I guess it kind of evolved. You should get Michael on here to talk about the in-depth there, but. Fast forward to now, it's really as unconference as you could get, I guess. Like, we all go to this like outdoor school in Marin County, and like there's no real scheduled technical talks. It's really just about people getting together and kind of figuring out what they want to talk about. So there's kind of a lot of ad hoc, just organic teaching that goes on, and just hacking together, and also not hacking, like playing Foursquare and going kayaking and swimming and stargazing and stuff like that. And for me, that's been really, I think, really powerful and important. I mean, in terms of developing a sense of community and also having that time to, really just connect, as people. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are there any other community events that you're a big fan of that you?
Let me think. I know there are. One of them that I can think of is Node PDX, which was also really important to me at the time. I was living in Portland, and I was a speaker there, I think one of the first ones, and it recently came back. So there'll be a Node PDX in 2016, and I'll be helping to organize the hardware track there. So there should be lots of fun IoT stuff. Let me think. I mean, the other things that I guess that I am partial to, I love the NodeBots meetup. That's something that has kind of, again, started as a really local thing, and it's kind of, it's blown up into lots of different meetups throughout the US and throughout the world. So I like the NodeBots SF meetup, obviously, since I'm here. There's also just like the general Node meetup, which is fun. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting, so I apologize.
It was just whatever came to mind. So I guess kind of like the last thing I'd like to cover is kind of if you had any, I don't know, like advice or like for people starting out, like things that you did that worked really well or things that maybe didn't work out so well, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
I know, that's kind of a big last question.
It's a tall order, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm someone who's kind of bad at giving out advice just because, I probably suffer from imposter syndrome more than I should, but I don't know. I think, one of the things that I guess I've learned is like, I took a different route to getting where I am than I guess a lot of people have. And it's something that definitely made me feel a little, I don't know what the word is, but, it was something that caused me anxiety at times when I knew that I was, interacting with folks that had a more traditional background. And I guess what I've learned at this point is that, given that this is something that I have really enjoyed doing and, like am driven to do, like, I don't really feel like I'm at a disadvantage anymore. So I guess if I had to give some advice, it would be, to say that regardless of what your background is or where you've been, like if you're into doing something in tech, I think it's unique in the sense that you can, if you just, have the resources and keep trying. And so I know that what I just said is packed with a lot of privilege, but I guess what I'm trying to say is specifically just to the fact that like you don't necessarily need a CS degree to be successful.
Right.
So that's something that I'm only just recently kind of coming to terms with. So that's one bit of advice, I guess. And then other than that, I would say, as far as working in the Bay, I can say safely at this point that it is definitely more who you know than what you know. So make lots of friends, go to lots of meetups, and in your spare time, get good at coding.
Yeah.
Because at the end, it's really all about the connections.
Yeah, I think that it's funny. Like, so this is my third episode, and like that is definitely the running theme. So I interviewed Michael, and then I interviewed Kent Dodds, and it's like all around. Like, it really is like go to the meetups. You know what I mean? Like attend and get to know people, and it's it is a little bit too bad in a sense, because it adds this kind of like how
cronyism maybe,
like whatever. But being the reality, I think it is really important to like just engage with it, as many as you can. But I do think there's multiple. I mean, you don't have to be extroverted, like attending and speaking at conferences. Like you can just as similarly help out documentation on projects and just get to know people that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, and on that subject, I guess another bit of advice I should give that should have been obvious to me is like I said, like NodeConf pretty much launched my career, and the only reason that happened was because I took the chance to like blog about the stuff that I was working on when I was working at Casa Diablo, and Michael happened to see that article and asked me to speak. And so I guess the other piece of advice I would give is like, like tell people about what you're doing. And that's something that I'm still really bad about. Like there's tons of projects I work on and don't tell anyone about, but tell people about the things you're working on. I think is really important, because otherwise they don't know you're doing cool stuff, and they don't know to ask you to come talk about it more. So I think that's really important. And then, and also to, to the subject of like it being more about who you know than what you know. And how maybe that might be a little unfortunate in some circumstances, but again, when you look at this through the lens of open source software, which is almost exclusively about community, we are people. We're all people, and so I think at the end of the day, it makes sense that being a nice person and someone who is interesting and fun to talk to is going to be an advantage to you. So
yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, cool. Yeah. Did you have anything else? That was all my questions.
No, I think that's it. I didn't realize. I guess you've already talked to Michael, so.
I unfortunately didn't cover NodeConf.
Oh, you'll have to bring him back for NodeConf, because there's tons of fun stories there.
Yeah. Like a series on like events where I'll bring in the organizers and interview them. Yes. Like that, because that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I think that would be fun. I think that's all I have, other than, I guess apologizing, for folks that had to listen to me ramble for so. How long was that?
That's gonna get.
Gosh,
you were awesome.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So, no, thank you for having me. I appreciate the time to chat, and it's definitely brought up some interesting memories for me. So, I'm gonna think about the implications of those things. And no. Thank you.
Thank you very much.